nobody rises to low expectations. Instead of like, here's the expectation, we need to be more like Johnny, we're unintentionally saying, no, the expectation is actually here and we all should be like Jimmy, because we're defaulting to the lowest common denominator. I set the pen down and I looked at him. I said, you know what? So I'm going to take my boss hat off for a second. I'm going to talk to you really straight right now. Today is going to be the easiest day for the rest of your life. Right now, this is the easiest your life is ever going to be. So you can choose to not, you can choose to quit. I'm just going to encourage you. Maybe this is a muscle that you need to learn to flex because nobody's pushed you like this. Well, I'm actually really excited about the conversation today because I had such a weird, I just, so on Halloween, which is Friday, I was doing some, call it trunk or treat. So it's all the different businesses in this local town, right? We're going around and getting candy and stuff. And I ran into a friend, and he's originally from Germany, and he's a professor at OSU in something in the computer sciences. But he was a neighbor of ours. And when he moved in, we helped him move some furniture and stuff like that. Really nice guy. Married, has some kids. And anyway, just really quick in passing, as we were talking, I said, how is it going? Like, how's the school year? Because he's getting, going for tenure and stuff. And he said, man, he's like, I don't know what it is. He's like, kids just don't want to work these days. I was like, really? Just like really like a 2-minute conversation. And he said, yeah. He said, whatever they say about Gen Z is true and more. I was like, wow, like that's okay. That's at OSU, and OSU is like it's a magnet for people in the computer science world. Like it's very much like this weird like tech, right? NVIDIA, which is one of the biggest market caps in the world, came out of OSU. The founder did anyway, and so it was just interesting. And then the next night we go to dinner with some friends of ours. So it's a friend of Peyton's that plays on his soccer team. They are also homeschooled, but they also have foster kids. And he went to a seminary in Dallas, and then they started doing ministry stuff in West Dallas, which I guess is like the hood. And they're like, yeah, we're like the only white people, like, basically we have a black church and Hispanic community, and we took in like, some gangbangers, and so everybody didn't mess with us because they were like, these people are cool, right? They're here to help, kind of thing. And so anyway, as they were talking, they've got some kids in the foster system. And so all their kids have been homeschooled, mostly because they're like, yeah, we didn't want our kids, going to the hood in Dallas, but then now they moved to Oregon, and this one foster kid that they have, she's going through the public school system, right? And so they go and sit down with the teachers, and they said it was weird because they'd never been to a parent teacher meeting before. And she's behind, not doing well in school. And so they, as the foster parents, are like, okay, well, how do we help? And they said, no, we're just here to encourage. They're like, okay, well, what do you mean? They're like, she's having a hard time reading, and how do we do this? They said, no, we don't read with her. Like, we'll just take it down to like bite-sized pieces. Like, okay, what do you mean by that? She's like, no, if a sentence is too hard, we'll just like do individual words. Like, okay, are we gonna teach her how to read though, or are we just like lowering the bar? And so they came away from that meeting with kind of the same, like, wow, like the expectations and the bar is getting lowered so much. It's like, okay, you think that you're helping because of empathy or something, but I think that we're confusing expectations that we probably should have and being empathetic and saying, and in my mind, I'm like, I think people think it's like a balance. Like, okay, if we have high expectations, it means we have low empathy, or vice versa. I'm like, I don't think so. I think that we need to have both. Like, we have to have high expectations, and we can be highly empathetic. Like, yeah, this sucks. Suck it up. Let's go. So it was just an interesting conversation that we had for the other night. And so it was kind of interesting, like back to back. So it wasn't just in elementary school. It was also at arguably one of the top tech schools in the country.
Yeah.
And a professor who's teaching in that space. And so I was like, well, this would be a fascinating conversation to ask Ray. What is your thought perspective? Because I was telling my friend at dinner just about you and saying, it's a weird juxtaposition because being a school counselor, but then also being a football coach, and those two things seem to have that balance. And it seems like you balance that well. So I just, what do you see? What have you seen? Wh- And because you weren't in education forever, right? You worked in the group home for a long time. So I don't know. Where do you see things at? Where do you see them going? And how do we start holding people to higher standards? And I guess the last piece that I'll preface this with, because I heard a phrase and I had to look it up the other day, and I guess it was actually from George Bush Sr. And the quote was, "People are suffering under the soft bigotry of low expectations. How if we expect people can't do stuff, then they will rise to that challenge." Or like Les Brown, who was a motivational speaker, and he said, "Nobody rises to low expectations." And so I was just thinking about that, like in education and in athletics and performance, like what are you seeing, and how do we? Maybe it's selfish as a parent. Like how do I have high expectations for my kids, but at the same time can be empathetic, and I don't know. I don't know what I'm asking. I just was like, I
No,
need to ask.
I hear what you're asking, man. And that's actually interesting how you're hearing that from you know high levels of academics and in the college level to hear that phrase that you said, which was like kids don't want to work no more. Um, and that didn't start at the high level, right?
Right, right.
It started way before that. And I think it's those two quotes are really um what's the word? Like they really resonate to someone who like sees and is part of like the educational world, the academics. And I'll be honest with you, I don't, in my perspective, I think that I see a lot of teachers being like handcuffed to a certain like curriculum and not like uh not teach out of maybe like their own personal experience. And what do I mean by that? So like you told me that I was kind of in a position where I'm a school counselor and I'm also a high school coach, right? There's some similarities, but there's also some differences because I coach from like experience, right?
Sure.
Like I've been to high level college athletics. Now, um, whenever I substitute teach, um, like sometimes it almost feels like there is like I'm handcuffed to a certain way of doing things, right? And it's really funny, like like something as simple as like learning how to do like math equations. There was a certain way of how we did things back in my days, and then now there's a whole different like way of doing things. And back then I knew why we did. Now it's more, this is just how we do it. And if you don't get it, well then,
Interesting.
like, like it's almost like so we can't think outside the box of, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking of the phrase like there's different ways to skin a cat, right? Like to figure out a solution. But I feel that sometimes because we're so handcuffed to a certain curriculum, whether it's passed down from the powers that be, um, instead of the instead of tapping into the wisdom that a teacher has, right? Because I coach out of passion.
Sure.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? If I'm handcuffed to a certain thing, then I'm not teaching from passion anymore,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Dude, that makes a lot of sense. I was because a lot of people have asked when I've been telling about the podcast, and they're like, "Well, so what do you guys talk about? Is it a lot of business?" I'm like, "Not really." But I think it all trickles up, right? Because there's a lot of I work with so many business teams, and as the workforce is coming in, it's amazing. I hear basically the same thing from CEOs. Like, man, people just like they don't want to work, right? They don't know how to flex and stuff. But when you're talking about the math thing, I was like, yeah, that makes sense because I remember when Peyton was first doing math, and I think it was some Common Core or something, and I basically looked at it. I was like, well, this is garbage. Like, this is not helping, and so I just threw it out. I was like, nope. Here's how we're gonna learn math. And as soon as like I literally started showing like we were talking about how we learned math, we're gonna carry ones and we're gonna do it
Yeah.
like this. And he was just like, oh well, yeah, this makes sense. How come people don't do this anymore? I'm like, I don't know. So forget whatever people are telling you. This is how we're gonna do it. And so because of that, honestly, I think that he's way more advanced in math than a lot of his peers. He's a year ahead in math right now. And so now it's getting into algebra and more complex stuff. And he just is able to comprehend it a lot better. Same with reading. That was the same thing that we were saying was we're not doing phonics and letters. We're like sight reading everything. It's like,
Mhm,
what? Like, that's
mhm.
ridiculous. Like, there's so many words you're not going to know ever because you're only going to see them once or twice. And so I think, yeah, that totally makes sense because the other piece of it too, especially with companies, is you get into a situation and what works for one person does not work for another person. Right? We're all different, unique people. And so the way that I motivate, and I think you instinctively know this as a coach, right? There's some people that you coach and they just need a lot of encouragement. They need some kids just need time to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah.
And they will, because that's just how they're wired. Like, no, just give me a second. I'm going to figure this out and then I'm going to go execute. Versus some kids are like, you got to spell every single thing out, right? Um, and so I could totally see that. So that totally makes sense what you're saying, because if you're handcuffed to, no, this is exactly how we have to do it, and this is now boilerplate for absolutely everybody, then that would be really hard. And there might be 10% of kids, or let's even just be generous and say 25% of kids learn that way. Um, but that means the other 75%, the other 75% are lost, right?
Right.
Um, yeah. So how did you do it? So how did it work at uh the group home? Because did you guys do school in the cottages, or did you send them to school? Like, how did that work?
Yeah. So, we had our own um like in-house teaching, and I wasn't really
Okay.
like familiar with it too much. Um, but it was I would say it was probably in a similar fashion to like what public schools would maybe experience. That would be my guess, but here's the
Okay.
thing, right? Like it's still um I would say like education wasn't the main concern when it came to school,
Right.
especially in
Yeah.
a group home. It was behaviors.
Yeah.
And I mean, even that, uh, like I'm just talking about when we're in the classroom, like the standards that teachers, administrations are trying to uphold. It can be really difficult in a public school setting because it's tough to keep it at a standard, but then have and I know this may sound really like callous, but like we're just gonna have everybody in the same class. Like we're just gonna fit everybody in, like whether your behaviors are rough, right? Or um you're not you don't know certain things as much as others, right? You know what I mean? Like you're not at a certain level of learning as other kids, but we're all just gonna be in the same class. There man, that
'Cause I
creates
think
a
that the
very
yeah, because I was going back to the conversation at dinner the other night, and they were talking about how in at least in elementary school, like, kids were not allowed to get ahead. Meaning if they were just like naturally excelling in math or something, they couldn't. And so they had to be held back, if you will. Like, you just like, you got this star athlete that wants to go like kick butts. Like, nope, sorry, you have to play here, and we're gonna hold you here because And so when I asked why, they said the thing that was communicated to them was it's not fair to other kids. It's like, okay, yeah, but some kids are just naturally gifted.
Right.
And so we should let them run instead of constantly holding them back. Because here's what I believe will happen because it happened to me. Because I was a pretty good student, homeschooled. And then when I went to school and had to get in classes with people, and then went at this pace, dude, I got in so much trouble because I was so bored.
Bet.
Like that's not to my own horn. I was just so bored. And so I'm like, man, I could see how you're going to cause behavior problems in people that, man, they just need a challenge and they need to get pushed and they need to, you know what I mean? So it seems, but obviously I don't know the solution because when you're talking, you've got a classroom of 30 kids,
Yeah.
how do you do that? But how do you draw the best out of people? Because I think unfortunately what's happening is if the bar keeps getting lowered and our expectations are not here, like, hey, we should strive to be like Johnny, right? And maybe that's not the best way to do it, right? But at the same time, what we're unintentionally doing is that instead of like, here's the expectation, we need to be more like Johnny, we're unintentionally saying, no, the expectation is actually here and we all should be like Jimmy because we're defaulting to the lowest common denominator.
Right.
That
Right.
is terrible.
Yeah.
Like, so
It's
how,
not a good environment, man. It's not a good environment for like learning and growing when you've lowered the standards for everybody. And like I think maybe some of the questions is like that maybe we should be asking is like, especially that is like what is our standards? What do we mean by standards sometimes? Uh and like kind of going back to what I was saying, it's hard to right when you come into school. um it used to be that the standard is yeah is at a level where like we're able to attain it and achieve it now. um maybe we do have a standard that's there for academics, but um how like the challenges that come with it is not necessarily maybe academics. Maybe the standard is just behaviors, right? Like I think there's a lot of teachers that that want to do well academically, but sometimes can be challenged more when it comes to just behaviors and the standards of behaviors that come in, right? Like I don't know. I feel that when I went to school, um, my parents taught me the behaviors. You, like you go to school, you respect your teacher, right? And and things will go fine with you. But it's not like that. Like instead of teaching math, sometimes you're redirecting maybe two or three kids that like like are known to have just behavior issues, right? And so you're in that. It's hard to continue to keep the standard high when you're constantly kind of like thinking along, thinking about the two or three kids that are you're struggling with, but like also you're also maybe even at times lowering like academic standards for the kids that you are having trouble with, right?
yeah, yeah, right.
um and I think sometimes we can look at that as like what like what's the balance between having grace with a student versus like flat out just like making excuses just so that like we can be done with the headache sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. And even going back to, back to that conversation I was saying, because their work that they started doing right out of college basically was in the hood. And then the statistics of West Dallas and the number of kids that, you're either dead or in prison or something by the age of 21 or 19 or whatever the number was. And I was like, geez, like it was heartbreaking, right? Because it's like, geez, yeah, that's tough. Like, how do you thrive in an environment like that? Like that would just be difficult, right? It just would be. Um, so it's kind of like what is sparking the thing. And I think that's probably why Jordan Peterson rose to prominence the way that he did, because his whole thing was, carry a load, do something hard, right? And
Right.
young men coming out in droves to do that. I don't know if I ever told you this story, because again, when I think of this, I think it not necessarily in the lens of education, because that's not my world, but I do think of it in terms of the CEOs and people that I work with and the workforce that is coming up, and they're having a harder and harder time. And so obviously there's some downstream effects of that. And I had this one kid, I don't know if I ever told you this story. So I had a kid work for me when I was working for Dax, the robot company. And what he had just got, it was okay. It was his first job. We just come out of COVID. So I don't really fault him for that. Right. So we just came out of COVID, and he's working for me. He's a freshman in college, and first job, I'm like, dude, I only need 10 hours a week. I need 2 hours every day in the morning. I need some help doing this kind of stuff. And have I told you this story? It's crazy.
Tell nah.
Maybe? Okay. All right.
Y-
So anyway, we I set him up 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. I need you to get these robots out. Here's the check-in process, blah, 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 blah. Well, it was going pretty well. And so I said, hey man, I could use 3 hours a day in the morning. And he said, dude, I don't know if I can do that with my class schedule. I was like, oh, okay. That's fair. Well, let's see where his class schedule is. So I sat down with him, like, what's your class on Monday? And he said, I have a class at 11. I said, okay, you got a class at 11. It's like, that's it for Monday. I said, okay. What about Tuesday? He said, I have class at 1 o'clock. I said, okay. Wednesday? I'm class on Wednesday. Okay. Thursday. So he had 11 o'clock on Monday, 1 o'clock on Tuesday, 1 o'clock on Thursday, and 11 o'clock on Friday. That was his class schedule. And they were hour and a half classes. And he was working for me 10 hours a week. And so I just set the pen down, as I'm like sketching this on a piece of paper, and I set the pen down and I looked at him. I said, you know what? So I'm going to take my boss hat off for a second. Like, pretend you don't work for me. I'm just going to talk to you like a friend. I'm going to talk to you really straight right now.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to quit. He was like, I don't know if I want to work here anymore. And I was like, okay. I said, today, like right now, today is going to be the easiest day for the rest of your life. Right now, this is the easiest your life is ever going to be. I said, so you can choose you can choose to quit. That's fine. I said, or I'm just going to encourage you. Maybe this is a muscle that you need to learn to flex, because nobody's pushed you like this. Like, he didn't play sports. He didn't have a really strong father figure in his life. I was like, so maybe you just need to flex this muscle and
Yeah.
work. And
Yeah.
so he did. He ended up sticking it out and working 15 hours a week on top of his 6 hour class schedule or whatever it was. So that was right. But that's the same thing. And then that's the same problem, right, that my friend was talking about as he's teaching students. I don't know how to work. And
Yeah.
it's okay. Like, that's problematic as well. So I don't know. So I'm seeing two things, because it's one is, right, you've got I think the lowering of expectations. And I think that's just true in culture in general. And there's a great book for the kids' names. So there were two kids in high school, and they wrote this book called Do Hard Things. And the whole concept was like, how do you teach kids that they can do harder things than just make their bed? And it's the same lowering of expectations. The whole book is great. It's about, kids in history that captained ships when they were 12 or 13 years old, or, like crazy feats that have happened for teenagers. It's like, yeah, these were generals of armies when they were 16, like, it was a different world.
Right.
Um, and so, but now I want to flip it a little bit. Like, do you see that in athletics, that kids don't want to work as hard because you grew up right in a locker room? And so now, like, do you think the kids have the same passion, drive? I mean, from the outside, it looks like in athletics, like, the bar just always gets raised and raised, right? The
Yeah.
5 minute mile gets broken, right? And everybody just is constantly getting better. There's no way that, an NFL team in the 1950s could keep up with most college teams, right?
Right.
Reality. So I don't know. So do kids, is that where you see kids learning to work and work hard and discipline, or is it still kind of the same problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll tell you what, in athletics, especially in the game of football, I'll speak just with football, right? Um, it truly is like only the strong survive. Uh, and I'm gonna say this too, not only like physically, but mentally.
Yeah, I bet.
It tests you both ways. Right now, it's starting to get cold. We're late into the season. We're in the second round of playoffs for our high school team, and we got bumps and we got bruises, and um, like we have to figure out as a team, like, if are we a team that's going to push past these things? I was talking last night, kind of all the coaches. Like I came in kind of late, so I'm already flustered because my tire popped, like it flat out, like loud noise pop. And
Really? Oh
so
boy.
like I'm pulling into practice, and I'm like, oh gosh, uh, upset. I got to change this tire. It's cold, and so, like, it was testing me already, but, like, is this is like, these small little tests, I've been through similar things many times because I've done athletics, right? There's many times where I've had to line up a guy, in front of a guy that was, 2 times as big as I was, probably stronger, and in my own mind, I had to think for myself and say, "Okay, am I gonna fold up like a cheap tent, or am I gonna give this guy everything I got for the next 60 minutes?" You know what I mean? And I had to constantly do that day in, day out, right? Not only for games, but also practice. So when I say, um, like, uh, like, not everybody can play the game of football. It truly is that because it spits you out. The culture of football is there's discipline, there's focus, there's effort that comes with it, right? And we've all heard it said that football is like the ultimate team sport, right? There's 11 guys on the field, and everybody has to be doing their job. If one guy doesn't do their job, the play falls apart, or a big play is made on your defense if one guy doesn't do their job. So uh there's something to be said to be in an environment like that that translates outside of the game of football,
Yeah.
right? Like there's something that just gets built in you as you rep it out, as you rep
Mhm.
discipline, focus, intensity, effort, putting the team above yourself, like, and um so, like, the kids that maybe want to start, and again, I give them kudos for wanting to go out there and wanting to try, but it exposes you very quickly, whether
Mm.
you're just there to put a jersey on and to be on the sideline, or you're there to, like,
Compete. Yeah.
you know what I mean, compete,
Yeah.
be part of what we're doing. So, like, um so the coach last night was he usually says, what he's gotta say for, the practice in the day, and when I got there, again, I was kinda, like, trying to reset my mind, get ready for football, and I started talking with a couple coaches, and a lot of coaches were talking about the same thing, like, "Hey, we've beat this team before, but we can't, like, slack. There's no slacking in what we do, right? Focus, right? Like everything that I'm saying, focus, intensity, effort, it's all still got to be there. And so when we all huddled up at the end, the coach was like, "Any coaches have to say anything?" And I kind of said, like, "Hey, you know, games mean a little different this time of the year, right? Like round one, like that's survival. Everybody is undefeated the first day one of the playoffs, right? In round one. And it's not hard to be hyped for something like that. And um but now we're in round two. Round two is different. Like round two is about separation. Like we have separated ourselves from the pretenders, right? And so, like, that mentality, I think when you're asking me what comes from athletics, why do I think a lot of maybe employers love athletes is because we've been in an environment like that to where, right? There's team goals. We're all in it. We're all doing hard things with a goal in mind, which is whatever, a championship, right? Now, of course, there's always going to be within a team, there's always, there's always going to be like a handful of guys that are, well, I'm in it because I want to have good stats, right? Um, but that's okay. Sometimes if our culture is good to where the standard is what it is, which is um put put the team above yourself, right? We can work those me guys. It may take a little bit more effort, but um you know the standard is what it is, or you can't play for us, right? Like you just can't. That's just how it's gonna be. Like because I go back to what I just said, right? There's 11 guys on the team. If one guy's putting himself above the team, okay, well, you can't play for us. You can't be out on the field because you got 10 other guys that are freaking doing what they need to do, doing their job, um, and are compromised because you want to be a me guy, right? Or you don't want to do your job, or you want to take a playoff, or you know what I mean? Like I love this game because it exposes those little things.
Mm,
And what's good is that we can correct it on the
yeah.
spot.
Right.
Whether it and we know as coaches whether we can really like get on a kid, right? High volume conversation, or tailor it to like an encouragement. Like, listen, yeah, I know you messed up. You messed up. Okay, now go back out there. What did you do? Right? Just kind of like, hey, tell me what you did. What are we supposed to do?
Yeah.
Okay, now
Right.
go out there and do it. And then it's like immediate. They go out and do the rep, and they're like, "Yup, did it exactly. Do your damn job."
Yeah. That's
Uh,
awesome.
okay, like I want to say, like everything that I was just talking about. Can you imagine a teacher that talks with the same passion about educating because that comes from experience
Hmm.
instead of being like locked locked into a certain way of doing things. You know what I mean? And um I think sometimes that can be like detrimental to teachers. And sometimes, I mean, if we're wanting to maybe examine some of the problems that's going on, like I mean, let's be honest, right? Like there's burnout, right? Parents are tired. Um but I don't know. Like you ha- you have to have a mindset that you have a standard for yourself, for your family, for your students, and that you're willing to push yourself so that you can push others,
Yeah.
right? To
Yeah.
to meet those standards of excellence. And I don't know, I just feel like um, there's been a lot of lowering of expectations and standards because like it got hard, and we went from um like I don't know, we went from like having a standard of excellence to I think it's good enough.
Right.
That's good
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah. And instead of pushing through the hard, right? Instead of stepping into the storm, we just are like, okay, well,
Yeah.
retreat from it a little bit instead of
Yes.
no, that's the point. And I think, like you said, in football, like I didn't play football, but in football, it's like, yeah, that's the point. You're gonna get beat up. Keep going, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the point.
Yeah.
Keep pushing forward. That's the point.
Yes.
To do
Yes.
hard, 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 hard. It's the point of the game.
Yep.
Um,
And if you can't do that, it's okay. Turn your pads in.
mm, yeah. Ooh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, and you can't really do that as well
Well,
with education.
you can't.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. The standard is no child left behind. And when you can, when that when the weight of like personal failure is taken off, and when I say personal failure, I'm talking about you didn't put the effort in, you didn't
Mm,
have a good attitude in class,
right.
um, and therefore your grades reflect.
Yeah.
But it's okay. We're gonna keep moving you forward anyways, or we'll give you a summer school class so that you can still dick around, um, and give you a lighter load and still pass you. What does that do? What does that do for someone? You know what I mean? It's the, well, I don't know if I can work. Uh,
Yeah.
it's the you be like that story that you told me. You're basically a life coach at that moment. You're
Boy.
scheduling a life out for a grown adult. Let's just say grown boy.
Yeah. Grown boy. That's a much better. Yes. Yeah.
That is like life 101. How are you prioritizing your day? And it went right over. It went right over. It said
Yeah. Yeah.
you you had to give him the coach talk.
Yeah. Totally had to give him a coach talk. Yeah. And yeah, it makes me, I think it just makes me sad that that is not the norm. It's kind of like when, I can't remember who I learned this from, but it's when somebody comes in, starts working for you for the first time. You set the standard here, and you're almost like an asshole about it, because it's like, hey, this is how it is. This is who we are. This is what we're about. And then I can soften into that as I build some relationship and some trust with this person,
Yeah,
right? Instead
yeah,
of like, oh yeah, no, we're cool. We're all family. We're good. And then when you got to come down hard on, it's like, "Psh, you're a jerk." It's like, well, no, but I didn't communicate that the standard was here. Right? I didn't communicate that this is the expectation, which is why I love, your whole thing that you've talked about when you go into a classroom, like, here's the expectation. This is what it says. Is everybody clear? Do we know do you know what we're doing today? Good. Right. No question. And I think in the same, it goes back to the thing we were talking about when you were giving the presentation to the teachers this last summer, and just talking through the why. Like, why are you here? Because it's the same with kids. The vast majority, I don't think, connect the dots, and maybe it's because they're kids and they don't connect dots that well. But they don't connect the dots to what I do today actually matters into the future.
yeah,
And I think I try so hard to do this with my kids all the time. It's the, okay, what goals do you have? And I'm fully okay with those goals changing, right? Like, I don't, if you want to be an astronaut today and then you want to be something else tomorrow, you want to be a garbage truck driver next week, like, I don't care. But you do know that each of these have a path. And so let's look into the future, and then let's start backtracking this path
yeah,
for you to figure out, okay, here's the things that we should start thinking about then. If you want to be like Peyton loves engineering, it's like, great. You should probably be good at math then, because you're going to do a lot of it. You're going to at least have to understand a lot of concepts. And so here's what that should look like. And it's same thing. Like, at any time you're like, nah, I don't want to do that. It's like, great. Well, then tell me the path that we're on then. And I think that that's so true with so many people. And I feel like I harp on this all the time, because when, like this last summer when I did the poll at these different emerging leader events and asked how many of you have written goals, and it was like 40% of the room had written goals. I said, okay, so everybody is essentially just aimless. Like, at least in athletics, like you're saying, there's a focus and a target. Yeah, everybody wants to win the Super Bowl. That's pretty obvious, right? So, right? And so everybody understands, okay, then I have to go through these hard things because that is the goal that I want to attain. But I think that that is so disconnected in the world. It's like, okay, well, why do I don't think anybody goes into, again, they're kids. Nobody goes into kindergarten. It's like, you know what my goal is? My goal is to graduate high school. Like, that's not the goal, right? The goal is something else. I want to be a whatever. I want to be a whatever, whatever. But I don't know if people paint a big enough picture of, okay, if this is what you want, then these are the things that are required of you. And
Right.
here's some of the work ethic, and here's some of the things you have to know. Because you're right. My friend that is the professor at OSU, and it's not the lower level. This is not the 101 classes. Like, he teaches the master's level degree stuff. And for him to, again, like, it was shocking to me because for him to say kids just don't want to work anymore. Wow. Okay. So you've got kids with master's degrees. So presumably they've already gotten a degree from somewhere in computer science or whatever. And now they're taking your class to get into the upper tiers of whatever. And they don't know how to work. Then
Right.
it's going to be really hard for them in the future. Like, life
Yeah.
is going to be very difficult, and it's going to be a rude awakening for them when they get into the real world.
Yeah.
And in the same way, and I think it's turning around. So during the COVID years, and pretty much anybody that could fog a mirror was getting hired at ridiculous rates because, and I got lots of stories of college graduates that I was unimpressed with, mostly because, like, well, I have a college degree. I'm like, bro, you have zero experience, and your college degree is in. I can't tell you how many kids I had to basically tell them, and I know I'm going to have educator friends that are going to be pissed at me for saying this, but I was like, dude, your degree is crap. They're like, no, I said, no, dude, it's a nothing. Like, that degree doesn't mean anything. Like, teach me what are things that you're going to, that is going to help in this job.
Yeah.
Nothing. Like, nothing is going to help you. Nothing. And and I can say that for myself because I went and studied theology. Like, that's kind of a nothing degree. And so I can make fun of myself. Yes, it's good. I learned a lot of things, psychology and sociology, whatever. But I learned more outside of that because I I had a desire to grow, right? Your degree was something cool like football. So you
Yeah, that was my response. What are you going to college for? What are you studying? Football.
football.
Yeah, I know that you're there playing, but look, what do you? Football.
That's so funny. Yeah. But the funny thing is that lesson, right? The things that you learned in football, I'm guessing, are way more impactful and have helped you more in life than the stuff that you learned sitting in the classroom.
100%, 100% for sure.
And so, man, I don't know. I keep going back to this, like, because, like, when we were in the car going to Spokane that one time and I was talking about experiential education, like, that's what I meant. It's
It's
the,
funny how you just said that. I thought about that like right when.
really?
Oh gosh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Go
Yeah.
keep going, man. My bad.
Oh no, it's just it's right. It's the experiences that we go through in life that's actually, like, forms us, and the hard stuff that we do. It's not necessarily, um, just the sitting and getting rote memorization and stuff like that. And if I'm not going to go into today, but if people understand, like, where the education system came from, it makes sense that it is the way that it is, and why we're getting the results the way that we are. Um, and I think that it's going to, and that's very quickly. I encouraged my professor friend. I said, well, I said, I think with the technological advances that are happening, that education is going to have to go through a major reform. And he essentially paused and said, yeah, that's a good point. Because the reason that the education system was built the way that it was for the industrial age, right? It was so that you were training people to be factory workers. Like, that was the point of the education system.
Yeah,
Well, that's not necessarily the world that we live in anymore. Or it's all been turned to automation or whatever. So it's, what are we doing to then create the next generation of people to, in my opinion, it's I don't want to just show up to, like, do a thing and memorize and kick stuff back to me. It's, how do you think, right? And what do you experience and what do you know? And what are the things? So I guess on the other side, on the positive side, this was last Monday. I sat down with a guy, and he worked for me at Dax as well. So it was kind of this weird juxtaposition. I had, the one kid I talked about. You can work 15 hours a week with your 6-hour class schedule and no extracurriculars, right? Um, but then on the other side, I had, and he was from Arizona, so we just called him Arizona. So I won't give away his real name. But Arizona, he, great kid, and worked hard and his parents were immigrants, which I think was part of it too. And so he worked hard. He was working, and at the time he worked for me, he was going to school full time. He was on I think it was the Mars rover team, so which was basically another full-time job at
Yeah.
the school. And then he was working as something at the school, and then he was working for Dax. And he was literally working about 100 hours a week between class, between Mars rover. And so there were several days that he'd come into work, and I was like, Sean, we don't have a lot going on. Why don't you go sleep on the couch for a couple hours? Like, just clock out, go take a nap because you was just running so stinking hard. So I had coffee with him this last week and just talked about the things that he's got going on and the stuff that he did in his, he just finished his master's degree and he's kind of at this inflection point. Do I go for a PhD? Do I do this? And I was like, man, of all the people in the world that I said, you send me a reference for any place, anytime, anywhere, and 100%, I will sign it, give you the best glowing review I ever can because you're an anomaly, right? You're kind of this anomaly of you just work freaking hard and you know how to do it. And so it's also the weird juxtaposition of I'm constantly telling CEOs that work super hard that okay, don't burn yourself out, right? Because that's a totally different end of the spectrum, right?
Right.
Of you're burning yourself out here, and then there's some people that's like, just freaking go, like do something. But I think honestly, for me, it always comes back to like, what is the why? Like, what is the goal that we're shooting for?
Mhm.
Because if we don't have that vision in front of us of who we are, what we want to be, what we want to become, maybe it's because I don't know. I don't how does that look? I guess in education. Like, do people, how do they define here's where you're at and then help connect those dots back?
That's a oof, man. That's a that's a thinker. You gotta think about that one. Like in simple terms, I guess. For where we work, for where I'm at right now, is just be a graduate, right? It's pretty
So that what?
lackluster.
This is the stuff that I love to push back on. So it's like, okay, so if the and I again when I go into companies, I say I'm the dumb guy,
I know.
right? Because I'm not in education. So if for example, I'm not going to pick on any school, but if let's say I was working with a school and the administration said, well, the goal is that we're going to get graduates. Great. So that what?
uh, so that hopefully, like, they become good, outstanding citizens that contribute to society. Like, that. That's me saying that because that's how I like counsel.
Yeah.
I
Right.
counsel. I counsel. I don't because I try to live in. I try to counsel and through potential.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah.
because sometimes the bar is so low that you have to like dig for those little golden nuggets that all kids have, all students have. They have it. Sometimes it can be buried uh more than others. Um I think that you know having those standards for myself gives me a little bit more of a, I don't know if the right word is authority to speak as such, right? Because I was a kid that struggled, right? I was a kid that um procrastinated a lot. And to some degree that's something I'm still fighting and trying to get better at. Uh but I'm not I don't let that keep my bar low,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't I don't like settling. I think if there's anything that I learned being an athlete is that if we do settle, well, that's when we can start to stagnate, right? And I don't like stagnating, whether it's being a husband, whether it's being a dad, coach, counselor. Um, are there periods where I feel burnt out and blah? Yes, 100%. When I am going through that kinda lazy period, uh, where I feel that, uh, when I go through that lazy period, I always feel that mediocrity knocking at my door, stagnation, whatever you wanna call it, and I just don't like it. I'm right back to, um, uh, like, putting my hand in the dirt and saying, "What are you gonna do? Like, are you about to get ran over?
Yeah.
Or are you going to are you go am I gonna stick my face mask into life, extend my hands, peek over, and go make the tackle?" Well, yeah, because why? Because I'm a freaking playmaker. I'm gonna make a play. And I'm gonna make the play when it comes to, um, loving my wife, where or if my kids are needing a little bit of extra discipline, I'm gonna make the play, right? So, or if there's a kid that's coming in my office, um, again, going back to what I was saying, I like to counsel based on someone's potential because I think that's a gift that God's given me is to
Yeah.
be an encourager,
For
right?
sure.
To look for those nuggets in people and help them bring it out, right? Yes, I'll be empathetic about your situation, but I'm kind of like you, like, okay, so like, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna what's like how do we move forward in this? How do you I had somebody the other day come in because they were overwhelmed. And so I asked them, okay, so what was going on? What do you think triggered the overwhelming feeling? Well, because I had a friend that is now dating another kid and they're not giving me attention. And I was just like, what about math? Like, what about math? So right now in my head, I'm just like, the standard's low. Your standards are very low. And I try to get to the root of issues sometimes with the students that walk into my office. And sometimes the kids don't like it, but I'm going to tell them the truth. You're just lazy. Sometimes some kids do. So like, and those are the kids that are doing much better, right?
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
I've given them a slice of reality and have told them you're accountable to this. Whatever effort you're going to do is like if you're tired of mom harping on you about grades because that's what a kid came up as. I'm just tired of my mom just telling me about my grades, and that's all we ever talk about. I was like, well, let's look at your grades. Oh, well, okay. I mean, I would be harping on you too, buddy.
Yeah.
And then he's like the kid's looking at me like, what? I was like, yeah, you and me. If you were my son,
Beyond you. Yeah.
I'd be on you right now.
Yeah.
And I look at the kid in the face and I say, and good for your mom. Your mom really cares about you. She has a standard for you, but that
Yeah.
you're not meeting. Well, I think it's like this, and that. I was like, or you're just lazy. And like like to see the look on the kid's face when he goes, "Oh, you got me." I am kind of being lazy. I was like, yeah, you kind of are.
Yeah.
So do you want to fix this or not? It's up to you. It really is. We can write this whole academic plan of how you're going to do it, but if you're not going to follow through,
Yep. Why bother?
you
Yeah.
and me can just chat and I can just say, "Oh, yeah, I can kind of get on you a little bit, but nothing's going to change." And sure enough, man, like same thing as kind of what you do, right? You kind of set a goal. Uh, uh, and the goal is to get mom off my back. That's the first initial goal, right? I'm gonna be in it with you. But also at the same time, hey man, I think it'll feel really good for you. Like you'll actually feel that you accomplished something once you start seeing your grades change. And he's like, oh, okay. So sure enough, 2 weeks later, when I set a meeting, right? You gotta go out, right? We huddle, we play, and then now we come back and huddle and see where we're at.
Yeah. I love
Um,
that.
his grades are great. Hey, is your mom on you? Yeah, actually, mom and I are getting along really well. Again, and then this is and like now I'm gonna contrast. contrast um that mindset that a kid is start kind of like developing a little bit to um and effective counseling as opposed as sometimes I have to say this, like counseling, good counseling is way more effective when somebody's ready to be counseled,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah, it
It,
makes
it
sense.
it's not it's incredibly difficult when you have someone that walks in and all they want to do is is complain about life and woe is me and every right. It's about it's everybody else's kind of fault, right? My friend's not paying attention to me. uh like I'm not getting paid attention to at home. My teacher's getting on me about not turning my work in, right? What do we it, it's foreign to me even though I've heard it so many times. It's just like, well, like, get it done. Like, are you gonna right? Like, I go back to lining up, man. Are you gonna get ran over or are you gonna do the running over? Which one are you gonna do? Oh, but again, I obviously dress those things up in a certain manner so that you know it's more understandable for kids. But that's really it. I'm always constantly trying to raise the bar for students in a few areas, and really in two areas: your attitude and your effort. Those are the only things I've told my boys. I could
That's
care
good.
less about grade, like what like the letters are, because I know the letters will be what they will be if you give great effort and you have a
Mm,
great attitude.
mm. Yep. That's so good. That's so good.
So
Yeah.
those are those. That's how I counsel. How's your attitude, and what kind of effort are you giving?
Yep. Yep. Because if you're giving me a 30%, that's lazy, right?
Right, 30% is an F.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so good.
So
Dude, we should probably wrap it on that. That was
yeah,
that was fantastic. And I gotta run to Albany. Got a meeting this morning.
cool, man.
Dude, that was good. That was
Yeah,
good. I think that was probably one of my favoriteest